Hello and welcome to Raising Me. I'm Adrienne Stein, and I am so glad you're with us today because we're diving into a topic that many families think about at some point: parenting with pets. Maybe you're even thinking about one for the holidays right now. But when is the right time to bring one into the mix? How do you prepare the kids and yourself, by the way, for everything that comes with a new pet? And then, of course, what about training? And then the inevitable moment when it is time to say goodbye, which is the worst. We are talking about all of it today. We have two really great guests from the local Animal Refuge League joining us today to help us navigate this journey. I will say this: I left with a whole new appreciation for our dog after this conversation. Darcy Blumendahl is a humane education manager who works with pets and kids. And then Amber Zawrotny is a behavior and training manager. So they're here to share their expertise and give us some advice on raising kids alongside pets to make sure everyone, pets included, is healthy and happy. So whether you're already a pet parent or maybe just considering it, we have got you covered. Check it out. Darcy and Amber, this is so exciting to have you here because you think like having a pet is such a rite of passage for kids and families in so many ways, but there's so much to consider. What are some of those things that we should be thinking about if we're getting that idea that, hey, maybe it's time to bring home a pet? What's the first thing we should think about?
Yeah. So from a kid's perspective,
yeah, I would think that if you are thinking about adding a pet to your family, there's a lot of things to consider. Your age of your kiddos is really important to consider first and foremost. A lot of research does suggest that, kiddos age 4 and up is about the time that they can really start to conceptualize what having a pet is and start to learn responsibility. But we understand that lots of homes have very young children and animals already in them. So how to navigate those things. But we want to look at the development of your children. Are they able to take on some of that responsibility? What type of pet fits your household? Is it a busy household? Is it a calm household? Those types of things are really important to consider on the kids' side of things. Age, development, type of animal.
And this is your focus, actually, at the Animal Refuge. Like, you work with families and kids on trying to figure out what's the best match and how to move forward.
Yeah, I don't specifically work on matching animals with families, but my role there as the humane educator is to foster kindness and compassion with children, teaching empathy, and hopefully that, transfers over to when a family is ready to adopt, that they can learn those skills first and then start to integrate that pet into their home.
Let's talk about a family as a whole, because how important is it that everybody in the family is on board with the pet? I think there's a number of different dynamics there. Maybe it's the kids. I want a pet. I want a pet. I want a pet. The parents give in. Maybe it's the dad wants a pet. Mom's not quite so sure, or vice versa. How important is it that everybody's on board here?
Yeah, I would say definitely everyone has to be on board. We do see quite a few families come through, and no ill judgment
right
here,
now.
But they get a pet to teach the child responsibility when it really does have to be everyone is on board. Children are still children. They're still growing. At the end of the day, it is up to the parents to be able to accept the responsibility when the child can't, or to do things that the child shouldn't be doing. If you have a dog, for example, a 6-year-old child should not be walking that dog alone.
Right, of course.
So you still have to be their exercise outlet, and you still have to manage the kid and the dog to some degree. They're still learning each other. So it really is so important that the whole family is on board and has a plan for managing that relationship.
Is there ever a scenario in which a surprise pet is a good idea? And I say that, I have surprised my mom with a dog before, and I can still see the look on her face when my brother and I walked in with this cute little puppy. Now, thankfully, she ended up loving the dog, but it was like, wait, what did you do? So is it ever a good idea to bring home that surprise pet? And I'm thinking in terms of the holidays in particular.
We don't recommend it.
Fair enough.
Because, so, I mean, we do have people coming in, looking for a gift.
Yeah.
And, it's really kind and thoughtful.
Yeah.
But at the same time, in order to set everyone up for success, we really want the person receiving that animal to connect with them before deciding to take on that lifelong ownership. So in the past, at the league, we've said, you know what, that is so kind that you're looking to pay the adoption fee, but have them come in, have them pick out their own animal, and then move from there.
And I see Darcy also laughing, like thinking of it just not a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, to speak to your wanting everybody to be on board, I just think that's really important too. And you also have to look at, if you have your child continuously asking around Christmas time or birthdays, I really want a rabbit, I really want a cat. But they're not asking for it at other times of the year, then also taking into consideration, do they really want that animal? Or is it the novelty of their birthday or Christmas coming up? And do they realize that that animal needs to be cared for the length of their life? So just also considering those types of things, that I would echo Amber and saying it's probably not a wise idea to surprise
lesson learned. So, no, it's fine. It's fine. You can judge, actually. But again, thankfully, my mom ended up loving this dog. So, we talked about a little bit, like we need to think about the age of the child and what they're capable of doing when it comes to care. But what are some of the other things we need to think about when it comes to choosing the right pet? Like yard size matters, right? Size of a home. What else before we get that pet into our house should we be thinking of in advance?
So from the dog's perspective, so I own a husky. It was
high energy, right?
High energy, high energy. And that's something to really consider is, what is the energy and the temperament of the dog I'm bringing in? If you're going into a rescue situation, you may not know exact breed, but you can meet the dog and get kind of a gauge and listen to the shelter employees that are counseling on this animal, because they do, know what that dog has been like there and potentially have previous home notes. And so really listening to, what kind of home is going to set that animal up for success, and really reflecting on, we know that most people fall in love with the animals that they meet. And we want to make sure that it's the right fit, not just, they're cute and they like the kid now, but okay, can we, logistically give this husky, in my case, can we give this husky, the energy outlets that they need? What does training look like for them? So temperament is a really good thing to consider. And again, that energy outlet. And then from the kid's perspective.
Yeah, I also think too, just, Amber's really speaking to the dog side of things, but remember that we do have other species of animals available, from small animals, even some parakeets and guinea pigs and rabbits and kittens and cats. It's really, important to consider what fits your household, your activity level, always the temperament of the animal first, but do you know about that animal? If you've never owned a rabbit before, have you done the research to know what it takes to own a rabbit? Do you know about cats? Do you kind of, do some research ahead of time to really know if your household is set up to care for those specific animal needs, not just that they want a guinea pig or that they want a rabbit, just really doing your research on lifespan of the animal and all the things that you need to do to keep them happy and healthy and enriched in your home are really important as well.
And making sure your home is prepared just in general. I mean, all those things are great to think about. And those are a lot of the things you cannot change.
Right.
You can change how your home is set up in order to ensure, like I'm thinking of how many shoes I have had eaten over the years, right?
Yes.
So how do we set our homes up once we've figured out, okay, a dog is right for me, a cat is right for our family, whatever it might be?
Yeah. So one thing we really like to harp on is that decompression period before a dog or cat. I'm going to expand my species here. But so, that first week in a new home is potentially going to be a little hectic. And so, we actually recommend starting smaller animals off in one room of the home and really working on just getting them oriented to a smaller space and spending time with them, obviously. But a lot of times, they're going through this huge transition. with dogs, it's good for them to have safe zones throughout the house, especially in a home with kids. So baby gates, exercise pens, a way to kind of sanction off your home so that if you see, okay, this dog's like really needing a break and the kids are so excited. Okay, well, the dog's going to go over here. We're going to give them a designated space to relax and hopefully foster that level of decompression. And that's not just important for the first week. It's especially critical for that first week, but it's so important moving forward too. Kids are, no matter if we live in a quiet home or a busy home, they're going to have busy moments. And sometimes the animals don't always want to be a part of that. So providing some way for them to kind of escape and quote unquote go to their own room sort of deal.
One thing that comes to mind too is just training. And the idea, we'll train the dog, we'll train whatever, is sometimes a lot different than the reality of the amount of work it can take, especially for, say you have a husky or like a highly intelligent, high energy dog, I'm thinking of in particular. So how do you set the training up for success? And what are some age appropriate ways to get the kids involved in training in a way that sticks? Because everybody gets excited the first couple of weeks and then you're back into the regular routine of life. The dog, in this case, what I'm thinking of, still has to have that regular training.
Yeah. I think that you don't want to rely on your kid to be the sole trainer of your dog. And so, I know right now at the league, we're even throwing around some options to incorporate children more into some of the training classes that we offer, but in no way suggesting that, your child of any age really should be the sole training person for your animal. Going back to before, everyone needs to be involved in working with that animal. To keep the kids engaged, I think just, that fostering responsibility is really important. Maybe it's not the training piece of it, but maybe it's, they're involved in the feeding routine or the playtime routine or other enrichment so that they feel involved and being with a parent while a parent is working to train with them, but definitely not relying on your kiddo to be the sole training person. But there are other ways that kids can get involved with the care of animals that really helps them to develop really deep bonds with animals.
Yeah. And just to kind of build off of that, so we are thinking of doing a class on this because it is such an important topic because, everyone wants to be involved in the success of the animal in that home, especially the kids. Really important to note that enrichment is part of training. You can't train a dog to be perfect if they have underlying unmet needs. So if the child is able to do that in a safe and productive way.
You say enrichment, what exactly do you mean by that?
So I mean, using their brain for fun. That can be running around the yard. That can be playing fetch or, playing tug of war or anything like that to really just get some of that energy out. Different for all dogs, obviously, but we really, we have a whole week where about half an hour of our class in most of our classes is dedicated to specifically what kind of enrichment can you give to your dogs sort of deal. So mental and physical, just to kind of tire them out and get them in a space where they're more open and engaged to training because they're not short circuiting being like, I have so many things that I want to do right now.
Right. Like that energy is all pent up.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's really important to note often when I speak to kids about what enrichment is we tell the kids to imagine that if they had to be in their bedroom all by themselves with nothing, say, we took away their tablets and all of their fun things to do and they just had to sit in their bedroom and do nothing. That's often what it can be like for a dog that's left home all day alone or in a kennel at a shelter, not getting that enrichment all the time. So kids really seem to relate to that and understand they think that's so boring. I want to be doing stuff. And so getting kids involved even with making some of the enrichment, craftier kids that want to make toys for their animals or maybe make special treats for their animals that they get during enrichment times, filling Kongs with, fun treats. Kids can get involved that way too. But I think it's really important for kids to recognize that their animals also have feelings and emotions and needs just like they do. And when you liken it to that, kids often understand that that would be really boring just to sit in a blank room all day. And I would be really bored. And so that's another way to get kids involved and really invested in the well-being and the enrichment of their animal.
Yeah. And then as far as, incorporating them into the more formal version of training, trick training, things that aren't necessarily invasive, but are fun to do, are great because it, first off, gets the kid excited. Yeah. They get some small wins and they get some party tricks to show their friends.
Exactly.
And reading to your dog is, developmentally very good for the child, as well as, dogs don't necessarily understand all of what we're saying in English, but it is, they understand that this is purposeful time.
Well, ultimately, when it comes to training, though, it really is on the parents. Kids are supporting, and it's a great opportunity to teach, that this is part of our family and some responsibility. But it is really, what I'm getting from this conversation, it really is, it's the parents' responsibility for sure. So, are there specific techniques that you recommend when it comes to training, or is it like you got to go to a course to make it actually work?
This is something I'm very passionate about.
Okay.
Dog training is not a regulated field, and it probably won't be anytime soon. So when you're choosing someone, just even to guide you in that direction, I would really, really recommend someone who is credentialed and looking for, a positive approach, a relationship-based approach. And so, at the league, we are primarily positive reinforcement, and we align with the Association of American Veterinary Behaviorists. So, which, all that being said, the most recent studies and the ones that are most backed are saying, fear, intimidation, pain, anything like that in dog training is not warranted or necessary for the majority, if not all dogs. That being said, the reason that I say that is because if you Google a prevention or if you Google a solution to an issue you're having, you are going to get a million different things on how to work with this dog. And they're not all science-backed. So the short answer is I've seen people be completely successful without a trainer. And, if that works, great. But I would also say, taking it from a proactive, preventative standpoint and getting the dog into training with someone who is, credentialing themselves, continuing their education, can make the road a lot easier.
And just consistency, just like with so many things. And what also comes to mind is the socialization process. Socialization, how important is that? And what are some of the ways that we can socialize our animal, again, to make sure it is a good and healthy fit within our family?
Yeah. So for anyone listening, Dr. Sophia Yin has a dog socialization checklist that you can get online. We send it. It's a free resource. Kind of just goes through all the things. Socialization is a really interesting topic because, for the majority of us, we think people, other dogs. We need to socialize our animals to people and other dogs. We don't necessarily always think about exposing them to different textures, different flooring, different noise levels, things like that to kind of give them a broader scope of experience in life. And, I'm going to talk about my dog a lot.
Yeah, sure.
I actually, when I first got my dog, she was afraid of floors.
Floors?
Yes, at 1 year old.
Okay. Like in a home, floors.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, floors in a home.
Got it.
And so, you don't always necessarily think about that.
Yeah.
But I don't know much about her history. Maybe she was in a home with all carpets,
right.
So bringing them out and about, getting them those life experiences while also doing it in a positive way for the dog. So we've also seen socialization go the other way, where a dog is potentially nervous in a situation and we're doing it in the name of socialization, but what we're actually doing is confirming a fear. So we want to take it really slow if we're seeing that our dog is nervous or anything like that in a certain environment, so that we call it flooding. We don't want to flood them to things that are, really scary for them. We want to give them a gradual exposure to that.
And how do we handle challenges that come up? Because ultimately, the things that we're talking about are things that, in a perfect world are designed to create a very good situation for family and for the pet. When challenges arise, whether it's behavior issues or maybe the dog grows bigger than the family thought and they don't have the room, or, when again, going back to the idea becomes different than the reality.
Mm-hmm.
How do we address those challenges? Because ultimately the goal, and I'm sure for the two of you, is to make sure that they stay with a family rather than going back to the shelter, in many cases. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's always a pivotal point.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is also a very, good topic, just because most of the time dogs aren't going to be exactly your ideal of, when you bring them home as a puppy. We may have big plans for this dog, and then we realize their limitations. And it's just like, learning a new person. Like, my strength is behavior. My strength is not children, right? So if you told me to be a dog trainer for children, I'd be like, that would be terrible.
Right, sure.
So if we think about
self-awareness.
Yeah, self-awareness.
Right.
And that's why I have Darcy, so that you get the full picture. But, that being said, it's kind of the same thing of, okay, let's pivot. Let's create a new game plan. How do we work around this? And, if you're having trouble finding some form of a modification, then reach out to a professional, and we can see what kind of, modifications we can make, if any, and really go over options and scenarios with you before a breaking point hits, right? Because sometimes parents don't realize that there is an easier fix within the home, or maybe not easier, but there is a reasonable fix here. And I firmly believe that no one intends on surrendering their pet, like, get it as a puppy, surrender it at a year or two old. No one intends on doing that. And it's a heartbreaking decision for everyone involved. So, trying to find those modifications beforehand, before you're at the crisis point of, okay, this truly isn't working.
And you're in a surrender kind of situation.
Yeah.
And Darcy, I see that you're nodding your head to all of these things.
Yeah, I think just also that goes into doing your research beforehand, hopefully. When you adopt a puppy or kitten, we don't always know what we're going to get, and we also don't always know that with an older animal either. Things can change, and we recognize that people's home situations may change, and that ultimately may be where we end up. But we try to do everything we can to, kind of mitigate those things, doing those things ahead of time. In the sheltering world, we call that intake diversion. We really want to keep pets in their homes, and it's helpful when we have folks that want to work with us so that we can hopefully modify those things, so that we aren't faced with a heartbreaking situation. But just like, children, when we have a brand new baby, we don't always know. We have great expectations and we think all these things for them, but they are their own being, and they're going to develop and be this tiny human, and we don't know what that is. And it's not undifferent from getting a new animal and bringing them into our home.
And just, going off of heartbreak, what about pet loss and helping a family and children navigating the loss of a pet? That's it's so hard, So what, what kind of advice or guidance would you have if a parent knows it's coming soon, or they've recently experienced pet loss with their kids?
Absolutely. It's interesting when you decide to have an animal in your home, depending on the age of your children, when you get that animal or the age of the animal. We all know that is ultimately going to be something that we all face. And I think for those of us that love our animals unconditionally and realize that sometimes the worst part of owning a pet, being that caregiver for them, is knowing that eventuality is going to happen. But in a strange way, it does help kids to experience loss. It's a very sad thing, but it does help them, because if they experience that with a pet, sometimes at a younger age, it does help them navigate through life sometimes. And I think having very open, transparent conversations about what is happening with your pet, if the decision is made for humane euthanasia, what does that mean? Why do we choose to do that with our animals? How do we help them at their end of life decisions. There's a lot of great children's books written on pet loss and grief, so I would definitely recommend those to parents that are dealing with that, depending on the age of your child. It's one of the things that I strangely hear about a lot. Maybe not strangely, but children want to share that. Oftentimes in classes at the shelter, I get many, many hands raised within the first 10 minutes of just doing a new program, and my dog just died.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I got the chills.
And they kind of need an outlet there.
Yeah.
And it's okay. And I think it's okay to really be there with them and let them experience that. And depending on the age of your child, developmentally, like, can they be present if that humane euthanasia is happening? And I know that sounds very morbid for a lot of people, but sometimes that's a very nice way to create closure when you're saying goodbye to an animal. Because if they just leave one day and go off to the vet, it's kind of a weird universe for a child to understand, like, what happened to them. So sometimes if they're old enough to be involved in that process, that might be something to consider as well.
What might be, I mean, each child is different, but what might be an age where that would be appropriate?
I mean, I would maybe say 8, 9 years old to consider that, depending on the, the maturity level of your child, but obviously preparing them beforehand for what they might see. Because I do think that there is some solace in that, in knowing what's happening, and also just on the well-being of our pets too. Being with them at their end of life is honestly one of the kindest things that we can do for them.
It's funny. It's been years, but even just thinking about this, like, it takes me back to that moment, and my heart hurts, just even thinking back to
one
it.
Of the hardest things we all have to do.
It is. Oh my gosh, it's the worst. Darcy and Amber, if there was one takeaway for parents who are listening, what would that be? Darcy, first to you.
Yeah, I'll speak to the kid side of things. I think exposure to animals with children is so incredibly important. It definitely fosters kindness and compassion and empathy. And that can extend to children in turn then caring about their fellow peers, caring about their environment, caring about all living things. And so what I do at the shelter as a humane educator is teaching about all of those things. And while I think it's so important for kids to be exposed to animals, it doesn't automatically mean that they are going to be a more kind and compassionate person. So you get a dog and then boom, my kid is now kind and compassionate. It's all about what we model in a home. If a child sees a parent treating their animal with kindness and compassion and doing all of the things that they need to do to care for that animal, they in turn learn that by seeing it modeled for them. And there's tons of research saying that kids that, experience that animal ownership or guardianship as a young child, they extend that to later years of just having more humane views of the world and people. So I think it's just so important for children to be exposed to animals for sure.
And Amber?
Yeah. I think my biggest plea to anyone considering bringing a pet into a home with children is to really educate yourself on, the boundaries between pets and kids and the body language of that animal. So Darcy's other part just sent me an email, or not, sent me a video, Stop the 77, where we learned 77% of dog bites happen from dogs that have been established in the home. And so one of the things that we really try to have in our mission is know their limits. These are not vicious animals. These are dogs that, or any animal, but I'm harping on dogs.
Right. It's all good.
Being able to see when a dog is stressed or when their boundaries are being pushed, and being able to modify that in a way and manage the home so that, we are fostering a beautiful relationship between kids and dogs. From a dog perspective, I've seen the most beautiful relationships between kids and dogs that sometimes I look at it and I'm like, man, I wish I had that. There's just something really, really special about it. And so we can say all of these things, and it's just to help, them get there. And we do know how wonderful it can be, but really harping on decompression within the first few weeks, building that relationship before, that trust has to be established. It's earned. It's not guaranteed, right? And continuing to build that relationship in that way.
Yeah. Awesome. Darcy and Amber, thank you so much. I also want to mention we'll have more resources on our website, wgme.com/raisingme. So much good information, ladies. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I got to tell you, so many great takeaways with this one, though admittedly, my light bulb moment was when the ladies were talking about putting yourself in your dog's shoes, so to speak, often at home alone for hours on end, without entertainment or enrichment, simply just there waiting for you to get home, and how important they talked about it is to keep your pets both physically and mentally engaged. I will say this, we get so busy at my house, especially during the week, and often Blake, our pup, it just becomes a checklist item. And I am saying that from a place where I love my dog, but, kind of checking things off in the morning. Is Blake fed? Great. Has he been out? Okay, good. Move on. Just trying to get everyone out the door. But no joke. I went to the store the next day after this conversation and bought him 3 new toys and some new treats. And I pause so much more often to toss the ball his way or talk to him or give him an ear scratch or a belly rub. It was great. And he's doing great too. Thank you so much for listening to Raising Me. I'm Adrienne Stein. This episode is edited by Megan Littlefield and produced with Nate Eldridge. Please follow Raising Me wherever you get your podcast. And of course, we greatly appreciate a positive rating and review as well. Wherever you are, I hope you learn something new and get to take a little time for you.